Welcome to RJI's podcast series hosted by RJI President Lisa Ray. Restorative Justice International is an association and network of over 6,000 members and affiliates. In this podcast series, Lisa interviews leaders from around the world who support restorative justice, including crime victims, ex-offenders, exonerees, and human rights experts. In these podcasts, you will hear from key thought leaders who support systemic justice reform based on restorative justice principles. Now here's Lisa Ray.
Today is December 15th. It's 8 a.m. Pacific time, and we're opening our end of the year meeting of our Global Advisory Council. I'm Lisa Ray, the president of Restorative Justice International. We'll go around the room as we always do, which is really going around the globe, and we'll hear updates from 11 of our members. And first, I'm going to give you a real brief overview of our work in 2023, some highlights of our year, and not all our work. We did a podcast on the life of Tyrone Nichols, and also a podcast on restorative policing. We appointed David Love to the Global Advisory Council. We did a podcast on junk science with Chris Fabricant from the Innocence Project. We participated in a conference on restorative justice in Poland at the Adam Mickiewicz University because of Professor Barbara Janusz-Pohl, who's now with us today. We endorsed Derek Jackson for sheriff in Michigan. We did a podcast on the death penalty and restorative justice, and we participated in the African Forum for Restorative Justice because of Professor Don John O'Malley. And lastly, we issued a statement on Palestine and Israel, the war. And we have now been in contact with two victims, one in Palestine and one in Israel. So that's a brief overview of this year. And now we'll go around the room. And let's start with Jane Bolitho from Australia. And Jane, make sure you introduce yourself to the group. And you have, by the way, approximately 7 minutes.
Kia ora, good morning, everyone. My name's Jane Bolitho. I'm an associate professor of restorative justice. I'm living in Wellington, the capital city of Aotearoa. That's the Maori word for New Zealand. I'm Australian-based and go between the two countries, and we'll do a little bit of an update on both places. I'm based at a centre for restorative practice at a university, and there has been lots of restorative justice and restorative practice things happening in our hemisphere. I have been involved in the Restorative Justice Encyclopedia, which is pulling together, which is a kind of a landscape overview of all the jurisdictions in New Zealand, Australia, and Pacifica. I wanted to mention that we have a number of new networks where I guess the focus for us is about connection. Australia is a large country with states and territories. New Zealand is a small country with one level of government, but geographically we're quite close. And so the networks that I wanted to mention are, for example, the Oceania Network for Restorative Practice and Sexual Violence, a specialist network focusing on survivor voices and getting more victims access to restorative practice. The International Collaborative for Health and Restorative Practice, which is based in New Zealand, but an international group. There is a new government network trying to connect all people in government spaces working on restorative in New Zealand and Australia. And these networks are very important to us in kind of lifting the spirits of restorative justice workers and share in terms of sharing ideas and best practices. In New Zealand, restorative justice in schools is still very, very strong. In the centre, we are more focused in the justice space. We have been working on a refreshed national training and accreditation program that sits across restorative justice in the pre-sentencing space. We're also very interested in post-sentencing space and try and encourage our colleagues in corrections and prisons to come along for us on the ride. My colleague Helen Bowen, who is not here with us this morning, we work together. Her work that she's doing on a pilot, which is focusing on Indigenous New Zealand Maori restorative practices that are tikanga, which means right way informed for Maori people, is very important. And we're looking at working to monitor and evaluate that potentially with her. We are doing projects which are for the Ministry of Children, which are about increasing the number of victims in family group conferences. At the moment, many in New Zealand and Australia, that the vast majority of restorative is government funded. And that means there's lots of access to restorative, but not necessarily equity in participation. So we're very interested in trying to get more victims attending and looking to help out with that. We are increasingly getting work to design restorative justice schemes sitting within organisations and sitting alongside dispute resolution schemes in organisations. So this year we've done some work in the sporting space, in gymnastics, in national sporting tribunals, in faith-based organisations where restorative is being used alongside, instead of conciliation or arbitration, putting restorative in there early to try and proactively prevent harm and injustice occurring within the workplaces. So that's just a quick update from me. Lisa, I might pass it back over to you. I would like to say I'm this is a very hard time zone, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to participate. It's quite early in the morning here, sorry. And I'm very open to people emailing me and being in contact as much as you wish, as possible, because I am grateful for being in this group. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much. And we almost did a podcast this year on a research paper. We'll do it next year. But good. Thank you so much, Jane, for being here. Okay, I know Upneet has to leave early. So Upneet, why don't you go ahead? Glad to have you and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, everyone. Good morning. Here it's late night in India. I'm Dr. Upneet Lalli. Hi. Hello, everyone. And I'm a psychologist, and also I deal with the training. I'm heading the training and policy and research part of the Institute of Correctional Administration in Chandigarh, which is north of India. Sorry for my bad throat, just recovering. There are parallel developments. India, unlike Australia or New Zealand or the other countries, does not have a well-developed framework for restorative justice. What I've been trying to do is trying to increase the awareness and also educating people about restorative justice. There is something which is there in our traditions, which has been amplified. And in terms of the latest development, I'm just going to share with you. Just 3 days back, we had the Supreme Court of India, one of the judges, in his judgment, while upholding one of the legislative changes, one of the constitutional amendments that had taken place in terms of an article. We have Jammu and Kashmir, one state, which has had a lot of conflict. And he has asked he has recommended that there should be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that should be set up because of so many victims who have, from either side, from both the Hindu and the Muslim community and the Kashmiri community, who have suffered. So, and I'm happy to also share that he was one of the judges whom I had invited a few years ago on a conference on restorative justice. So this is something that is making, people are getting aware about it. And we have a we have a large prison population also. Large number of them are under trials. So there is also now an increasing focus, and we are focusing on alternatives to imprisonment. And one of the things is that in terms of the pre-trial stage, using restorative justice at all stages of the criminal justice system. That's one part. And in April next year, I'm also happy to share, and Lisa will be there. We are collaborating. The RJI is collaborating, and our institute is also collaborating with the university, which is based in South India, for a conference on restoration and on restorative justice. It is going to be from the 4th to the 6th of April. I would welcome all of you to participate, to speak and share the experiences and your practices and your developments. We'll be in touch with you, and those of you who are interested, kindly get in touch with me. We will be having sessions. There are various themes, and we will be having sessions. Of course, I know we have experts in various domains. We have Austin, we have Jeffrey, we have so many of you. And of course, it was a great pleasure for me to be a part of the African Forum for Restorative Justice with Don John, who had initiated that. So I look forward to that. I won't speak much. I'm giving my throat a break. So thank you very much. And, just being together, and I think this as a global advisory, just discussing some of those developments in the world and also what's happening. So there is something parallelly that happens. Hate speech is something that's not just in the US, but it's there in India and so many other countries. And one realizes that, okay, here is something that this development has taken place. And ideally, I mean, this is what should be taking place. So those aspects are something that we all learn from each other. And I wish everyone, again, Merry Christmas. And hopefully for the next year, we will have a greater impetus towards restorative justice, even in our country. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Upneet. Always appreciate you and working with you. And I think that segues into Don John O'Malley. So why don't you go now, Don John? Welcome and introduce yourself.
It's good afternoon here and good morning to you in the US. Thank you very much, Lisa, for organizing this end of the year GAC meeting. And for the benefit of those who just joined the GAC, my name is Don John O'Malley. I'm a professor of criminology in Nigeria, the Federal University, Wukari in Nigeria. I'm currently with a lecturer with University of Derby in the UK here. We have been involved in restorative justice and trying to develop restorative justice in Africa for a very long time. I want to say that Africa Forum for Restorative Justice want to use this opportunity to thank Lisa Ray, the president of RJI, and Upneet, Lalli, and all other participants that actively participated in the Restorative Justice Week 2023 this year. One good information that I want to pass on is that at the end of that seminar, so many people were very, very impressed with the presentation and then begin to say, if we can make this kind of forum a face-to-face seminar. So we just hope that by 2024, we'll be able to see grants that will bring us together to a kind of a face-to-face conference so that we'll be able to meet ourselves and see ourselves in person. And thank you very much for all your contribution. And if we see grants, let us be kind of inform ourselves so that we can begin to apply for research grants or conference grants where we'll be able to come together and meet in person, because restorative justice is really gaining ground around the world. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And it was excellent to be a part of that forum. That's the second time RJI has participated. Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Professor. I think we'll go now from to Paulo Moratelli. And thank you so much, Paulo. I know you're juggling a lot of balls these days. So thank you. And introduce yourself. Great to have you.
Thank you. Good to see you, Lisa. Good to see you, everyone. Listen to me. Are you listening? Yeah? Okay. So, hello again. I'm from Brazil. I don't think everybody knows me here. I'm Paulo Moratelli from Brazil. I'm a psychologist, facilitator, instructor of restorative justice. My experience is with serious and complex cases, complex crimes, such as homicides, robberies, rapes, intra-family sexual abuse, children and adolescents abuse, children, adolescents, and elderly people in government shelters, divorces, etc. You name it. In all of these cases, in legal proceedings, I also have worked in schools, universities, prisons, private companies, in short, a little bit of everything. Nowadays, I only work with my own method, which I call transformative dialogues, which are designed exactly to work in these types of situations. This was only possible because in Brazil, restorative justice does not have a law or regulation that prohibits us from dealing with those kind of situations, those kind of cases. So I had a chance to work on these situations where most of the countries, you're not allowed to do that in restorative practices, cases like rape or gender violence and so on. In this year, 2023, in addition to my normal facilitator training courses, I have been conducting supervision and mentoring processes for facilitators and also to courts and public ministries and other institutions. But lately, I've been doing most is to serve private companies in working with people in conflict management processes inside these companies. That was the people that been looking for me in this year. It's good to see you all. I never had the chance to be in the previous sessions this year. It's been a very busy year for me, but glad to be with all of you. I'm at your service in Brazil. If you need something, just let me know, please. And I wish to her of everyone else what are they doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Paulo. And hopefully this next year will be filled with good things for all of us. It's been a hard year, I think, for many of us doing this work. But here we are, and we have great energy. So thank you. And thank you for your technical support as well, Paulo. Okay, let's go on to Jeff Deskovic. Jeff, are you with us? Great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. So as everyone knows, I was exonerated through DNA testing after 16 years in wrongful incarceration from age 17 to 32. I've been home for 18 years now. I took some of the money I got as compensation. I started Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, whose goal is to free people in the same position that I was once in and to prevent what happened to me from happening to others through policy changes. So far, we've freed 13 people. We helped pass 6 laws. Currently, we have 13 other cases. Happy to report in the last year that I was able to overturn my first conviction as an attorney, serving as co-counsel to lead attorney Oscar Michelin. We were able to help Andre Brown get released after 23 years incarcerated. In terms of restorative justice, as applied to wrongful conviction, one part of that is the society trying to restore the individual by means of compensation. And that ties into my work in collaboration with the National Coalition Group in the U.S., It Could Happen to You, which has a Pennsylvania chapter. We've been working for compensation in Pennsylvania, with PA as one of 12 states in the U.S. that does not compensate. We've got a bill that was introduced that made it through a couple of subcommittees. We're trying to get the Senate to introduce a bill. We're trying to modify the bill a little bit to make it just a little bit stronger. But that's some of the work that I'm doing. In terms of It Could Happen to You, the California chapter, which I'm active in as well, we're raising awareness about the problem of, of prosecutorial misconduct, with the idea that public education and also with the elected officials and building general support to eventually move to a piece of legislation that would be aimed at curtailing prosecutorial misconduct. I mean, I think that ties in restorative justice, because if we're going to turn away from something, if we're going to make wrongfully convicted people whole, that means that we have to try to prevent wrongful conviction from happening again. And certainly that commission is part of that. In New York, with the New York chapter of It Could Happen to You, we were working with, in collaboration with Vocal New York. We were able to legislatively pass the Challenging Wrongful Convictions Act, which would provide counsel for indigent defendants in post-conviction motions. There's currently no right to counsel. It would allow people who've pled guilty but who subsequently get a better attorney and they find some evidence of innocence to then have the courts consider that evidence. Right now, under bad case law in New York, if you've pled guilty, you're not allowed to later argue you're innocent. You're not allowed to later argue that there's newly discovered evidence. And lastly, anyone who has a conviction for a crime that subsequently becomes legalized, you'd be able to return back to court to remove that from your record, which is important because of the collateral impact a conviction has in terms of implications for jobs and voting and public housing and stigma. So we're working on that bill. It's not really clear if Governor Hochul is going to sign the bill or not. It's been radio silence, but I am planning to be involved in some media and also meeting with some elected officials as well, with colleagues towards trying to persuade the governor to pass that bill. There's some other legislation not passed, but that's been introduced that the foundation's working on, which pertain to false confessions, recalling that false confessions cause wrongful convictions in 29% of the DNA-proven wrongful convictions. So this was called a police deception bill, which would bar the police from using deception in interrogation, recognizing that lying to suspects in an interrogation is inherently coercive, and that has sometimes led to false confessions that culminated into wrongful convictions. There is also a bill that, the current law in New York requires police to record custodial interrogations, but there's been carve-outs for homicide, sex offenses, and drug cases. And so there's a bill that would get rid of those exceptions. And then also with the Right to Remain Silent coalition that the foundation is also part of, we've been trying to pass the Youth Interrogation Act, which if passed, it would give 16, 17-year-olds and kids younger than that a right to counsel, whereby before they could waive their rights and speak to the police, they would have to speak to an attorney to explain their rights to them, recognizing that young people often don't understand their rights. Certainly, I never understood my rights when they were read to me, and without understanding them, I waived them, and ultimately I falsely confessed, and it cost me 16 years. So that's another piece of work. We've worked with the Stop False Police Reporting group, which is seeking to stop false allegations, both on the police level when they make false statements and include details in reports, as well as on the civilian level. It would, amongst other things, it would make it a felony rather than a misdemeanor if it was done against protected class of people, and it would also have a database so that people who have been documented, proven to have made.
How are we active here?
Yes, we are. I'm giving my presentation. So it would also have a database so that someone who makes a false accusation, their name would be known, so they couldn't simply move to a different area and do the same thing again. So I've mentored that group, and one of the protected classes of people are people in the LGBTQ community. So restorative justice as preventing false accusations, again trying to prevent to restore people, but that being one of the ways. Recently, I had my fingerprints on some international things. Made a trip to Brazil. Did a presentation. There. Came back from Taiwan, the Taiwan Innocence Project, who I want to hold up their work for a half a second. They have exonerated 14 people and have overturned 2 additional wrongful convictions where a retrial is pending. So I visited them to participate in the Taiwan Innocence Project Film Festival, where the documentary short Conviction, which is about my life post-exoneration and reintegration, is screened twice, and I was able to speak in the talkback sessions, did a media interview, picked up a podcast on the ground while I was there. And lastly, I got to speak at their Judicial Academy in front of 37 judges. There were 3 attorneys. One of the topics they wanted me to address was how to avoid presiding over a trial that culminates in a wrongful conviction. Taiwan recently went to a jury system 1 year ago, so they also wanted me to address in panel discussion how to speak to citizen judges, which is their term for jurors And then the next night, in front of 60 law students, I was able to speak about wrongful conviction causes, causes and the reforms needed to prevent them. There was a crossover. As I get ready to end, there was a very exciting crossover to India. So Deepika Bardawaj, her documentary called India's Sons was also screened there, and it documented how, as a result of some changes, the Me Too movement, their influence led to standards and definitions of rape being lowered, much lower bar. And as a result of that, there's a spate of false accusations of sex offenses that's going on in India. And that documentary shows between 4 to 6 cases of people that, really, one person even committed suicide. Other people spent significant amounts of time on pre-trial detention before charges were ultimately not substantiated. So we talked a little bit about, Deepika was going to try to put together a similar film festival like a year from now. So my point is we've been able to have international reach. And of course, all the work that I do, not just for the foundation, I wear multiple hats and represent multiple entities. And, I consider RJI, to be an important hat that I wear when I go places and do work. So it's been exciting to do some international things and hold up wrongful conviction. That's my report.
Great, Jeff. Thanks so much. And thanks for mentioning RJI when you travel. I'm so glad that you are traveling internationally. I know Upneet had something to do with that when we had you as part of her conference last year. Okay, well, excellent. And we do support you, and especially legislatively. And as much as we can, we'll stand with you. Okay, the next speaker will be Joe Barry. Joe, thanks so much for joining us. How's that risk doing?
Still stopping me from doing things, but yeah, getting there. So yeah, wonderful to be with you all. Yeah, Joe Barry from the UK. I think I know most of you, but not everyone. I have a charity, Building Bridges for Peace, and I spent the last 23 years doing my own RJ process dialogue with an ex-IRA combatant who killed my father in 1984 when I was 27. And that's that relationship has been transformative. And I work around the world promoting RJ and also facilitating workshops. Recently, I've been in Kosovo supporting the reconciliation happening there, or not really happening there, but like just showing what's possible and doing loads of listening. I'm involved very much with the RJ Council in the UK. I did the keynote for the first RJ conference in Northern Ireland in Belfast, got a standing ovation, which was amazing. I'm part of a European group called the Encounters of the Encounter, which is ex-combatants and victims of political violence all around Europe. We meet and do restorative circles. I'm also working now. I'm doing so much, but one of the things I'm really focusing on is next year is the 40th anniversary of what's called the Brighton bomb, which the Prime Minister was nearly killed. So it's quite a big one in the UK. And I'm planning to have a whole year of events to mark it in my way. So change the narrative. And it's all about the restorative way and kindness and compassion. And I'll be starting off with an event with Patrick McGee in London. I'll be doing international work. I'll be doing school work, prison work. I'll take the themes and all the work I've done for 40 years. It's basically my life's work. I've also been working with people from South Korea I'm helping people be more restorative in whatever way it is, doing a whole lot more teaching and facilitating. I'm also writing my book, and I'm working with someone to make a feature film of the story of me and Patrick, because I think that it's so unusual. And right now, to show that what is possible, we don't have to take sides, we don't have to have enemies, as we all know. So I'm really looking forward to that. This is still in the early stages, but I'm helping to write the script. I'm sure there's more, but I can't really write because I'm right-handed. So that's it for now. And yeah, definitely anything next year. I've got a very empty year and would love to be involved in any of your projects to add my voice. So thank you, Lisa. It's always an honor to be here.
Thank you so much, Joe. And I have to say that because of Joe, I met Israeli mother whose son was killed by a Palestinian. Her name is Robbie Damelin, and that was because of Joe Barry, and she's active with the group's Parents Family Forum. In fact, we're going to do a podcast next week with her. So thank you so much, Joe, for that. We can be part of the peacemaking effort between Israel and Palestine. Thank you. And the next speaker will be Austin Stack. Welcome and introduce yourself.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, everybody. It's just Austin Stack's my name. So I'm from Ireland, and my dad was a prison officer that was murdered by the IRA. He was shot in 1983, and he survived with very, very bad injuries for 18 months, and then he died in September 1984. So I tried to do a restorative justice approach. I have a very big interest in restorative justice for a long number of years, and through my restorative justice work in prisons and that, I took it upon myself to try and do a restorative justice meeting with Sinn Féin and the IRA, and try to get them to meet with the people that had murdered my dad. I already had a lot of information around it at the time. Didn't quite work out that way. We did get an admission. We were brought in a blacked out van up the side of a mountain on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And we were brought to meet a senior IRA man who admitted after 30 years that yes, they had carried out the attack on my dad, but they cloaked it in. They gave us about 70% of the truth. They kind of said to us that it hadn't been sanctioned, even though they were covering for their political agenda at the time, because a very senior Sinn Féin official was the person that actually sanctioned it, and I knew that. So we had a bit of a falling out afterwards about that. So, you know, I do believe that if it had to be managed properly by an external agency, maybe we mightn't have got as far as we did, but maybe we would have got a little bit more from them. I don't know. But I have kind of worked away and chipped away representing victims and been a victims advocate since then, and trying to put a restorative justice spin on everything. I suppose I have been kind of out of commission a bit for the last couple of years, but slowly I've got back into the swing of things this year, being under the treatment for my cancer. So I kind of have been getting back into doing the EU RAN meetings this year. So I attended a couple of RAN meetings. One, I'm on two working groups. The RAN is the Radicalisation Awareness Network. So it's a European Commission initiative, and there's several working groups, and it's all about preventing and countering violent extremism. And I'm on the Victims of Terrorism working group, and I'm also on the Communications and Narratives working group. So we had a meeting in Berlin earlier on this year of the Communications and Narratives working group, which had ex-terrorists. I don't like to call them ex-combatants, because that means that the innocent party was also a combatant, which in my case, my dad was not a combatant. He was never a combatant. He never held a gun in his life, never knew what a gun looked like. They call them farmers. All these nice words that they tend to put on ex-terrorists. But there was some of them in the room. It was a very tricky meeting, because there were some ex-terrorists in the room, and it had to be managed very well. And you know, I will deal with and I will work with ex-terrorists as long as they accept responsibility for their actions, and that we can come and talk and find common ground. And I am very open to do that, and I've always agreed to do that whenever I can. So it was quite a useful meeting, even though it was quite tricky. We then had a Victims of Terrorism meeting in Spain about 2 months ago, and that was all centered around remembrance and memorials in relation to various different terrorist atrocities that took place around Europe. Going right back to the Spanish Civil War, so there was a lot of people in the room, and we're trying to put a restorative spin again on remembrance and memorials. I also was asked to go this year and unveil a memorial to 7 Spanish prison officers that were murdered by ETA during the ETA campaign in Spain, down in Puerto de Santa Maria. And that was a very moving experience. And, I was delighted to be asked by them to go and do that, unveil that memorial. Also, through my work with the RAN group, Anna Milosevic, who is part of the Victims in Terrorism group, she's a PhD lead in the University of Laverne, has written a chapter it's a new Cambridge published book, which will be published in April, about the history of the EU, and she's a chapter in it about remembrance, and she has used some of my stuff in relation to the whole talk that I do about giving them back their monkey, and she has used that in the thing. So that's going to be published in April. Also here in Ireland has been, and you may have seen at least, a very disingenuous attempt by Sinn Féin and the IRA to produce Sinn Féin are at the moment the lead opposition party in Ireland, and they've attempted to put a private member's bill through the Irish Parliament in relation to restorative justice, and it's quite cynical, to be honest with you, because I have a lot of experience of seeing how Sinn Féin have used restorative justice in Northern Ireland, and again, I was very open to going up and having a look at what they do and meeting with people on the ground up there, and I have done that, and essentially what they've done with restorative justice up in the north of Ireland, particularly Sinn Féin have controlled it, and they basically have put ex-terrorists into positions of control on the restorative justice groupings in the different communities up there. And essentially what it's done is it's another mechanism for them to control communities, where the terrorists used to control the communities. Now they're using restorative justice to control the communities. And I really believe that we have to be so careful about. It's got out of control up in Northern Ireland, and I certainly don't want to see that happening down here, that they're using restorative justice as a mechanism to control communities. And I really believe this is the first attempt at this. And I was actually quite surprised that an academic got involved with them in relation to this. And I have first-hand experience of how they do this. And look, even if people research it, they will show that, one of the leads in one of the restorative justice groupings that they have up there was the named individual, and it's published, who raped a high-profile person here that has written, there's a new book out on it, and they brought her into a kangaroo court and made her face for an abuser. So that's what they do with restorative justice up there. So I don't want to see that happen down here. And I'm very wary of it. Also, I suppose my own book has come back from my one publisher looking at it again. So it come back from a couple of publishers, and basically I need to put more dialogue into the book. So I have an editor that's doing that for me at the moment. So I'll have that back before Christmas, hopefully, and then I'll be able to go from there with it. So that's my report of where we're at the moment, Lisa.
Good. Well, thank you so much. And we're glad your health is better too, Austin. I've been following that closely over the year. But we'll continue to work with you, and hopefully we can be truth tellers as we do the work that we do. As others, like you said, sometimes take restorative justice in weird ways and that aren't accurate. So thank you so much for being here. Okay, but let's move to Jonathan Peter Clayton. Jonathan, welcome. And unmute. Unmute yourself.
Hi, team members, RJI, Lisa, and everyone. I really want just to thank each one of you who already spoke, and just want to say well done. I sense your your excitement for justice and healing and reconciliation. So thank you very much for this opportunity. As you know, that myself and my wife, Jenny Clayton, our restorative justice process over the last few years is in custodial settings. We spent most of our time behind bars, up till 6 to 7 hours a day, working with different groups of offenders. And most of our offenders that we encourage to join the restorative justice process voluntary are life sentence offenders, and also offenders with sentences up till 80 years and longer. And it is amazing how we journey with them through about 100 hours per group. And for this year, we had 10 groups of offenders who signed up voluntary for restorative justice at different correctional facilities. And around about the biggest group that we had this year was 40 offenders at the maximum security prison. It's about a flight of 2 hours, and they felt I'm not always in that region, so they gave me 40 people at that point in time. But the 10 correctional facilities that we did the restorative justice process in over 100 years per group was really, really effective and productive, that we we reached out to about 263 offenders for 100 hours per group. And we also worked out the process with all for this year, just with the offenders that we journeyed with over the 10 centers, was 900 hours, apart from all our other responsibilities. So then also with the restorative justice process, because we focus on our victims of crime, and you know that South Africa is extremely challenging in terms of violent crimes in our country, and so we're dealing with the victims of crime, we're dealing with the offenders, but also with the community. But we also brought in the offenders' families. So that is the 4 areas that we focus on with this restorative justice process. With the offenders alone, what is amazing is at every restorative justice process, we had so many confessions where even social workers and psychologists of correctional services is saying to us, we don't get it right to get confessions from these guys through therapy. And they experience how these guys and ladies even made these confessions because they realize the impact of crime, the ripple effect of crime, even years after the crime. So out of that, a lot of confessions happened this year, people taking responsibility for their crimes. And because almost 80% now come onto this process and they say they're not guilty, they were framed for the crime, but about 90 to 95% this year confess that they lied in court, they lied to their families, they lied to the victims, they are guilty. And then also, what really excites us when we open this process for people to come and observe for between 36 hours or 100 hours, depending on people's time. And we had people from very different countries. And one gentleman from Texas, he's a filmmaker, and he is now busy looking at making a film out of this restorative justice process. And then early this year, I had a lady from Sweden, also a film director, and she is now busy liaising with correctional services to make a film out of our restorative justice process. She already came and did quite a lot of filming, and she's now presenting it to people in Sweden. And that is really exciting for us because they were present when these confessions came out where people take responsibility. They were present when the offenders' families came in on the process for 6 hours, and where the offenders confessed to their families that they are guilty. They were also present when we have victim-offender dialogues, where the offenders take full responsibility for the crime that was committed. And last week, I also did a session on restorative justice in practice for the School of Alternative Dispute Resolution in Nigeria, and it was really well received. And then also I did local restorative justice seminars here. Up to 40 people attend a seminar, and then also doing seminars for correctional officials. Now, we are not so privileged as many of you in your countries where we get government support. We've got no government support. Everything that we're doing is completely in faith, but I can now say that even for this year, we spent over 500,000 Rand, if it's not more, on restorative justice victim-offender dialogue processes, and we're excited about that. We are inundated already for next year for restorative justice processes here in South Africa, and I can also say that I've got about 3 PhD students that are now looking at our restorative justice process, and their thesis is going to be about our restorative justice process. And then we had Dr. Ulrika Fritzen from Sweden. She completed the PhD, and her PhD was on guilt, because she said that in Sweden, people commit suicide or have suicide attempts because they can't deal with the guilt of their crime. And she came to observe our process and now obtained her PhD. Because she interviewed our restorative justice participants and saw how this process helping people with guilt and shame and regret. Lastly, what we found, that victims do come for a victim-offender dialogue process, but I found up till recently, they still are very suspicious. They still find it difficult to believe the offender. It seems to me that they want to see more remorse. And so that just helped me now with further research in 2024 and to see how I can also spend more time with victims. But our South African government embrace restorative justice and victim offender dialogues, and our 248 prisons is open for this process if we have the resources. So thank you for being part of RJI. And I do mention, Lisa, when I speak, that I'm a member of RJI. Blessings to you over the festive season and the new year. It's tomorrow, my 31st wedding anniversary with the same lady who loved me more than yesterday.
Happy anniversary. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for all that you do. We appreciate it. And as much as we can work with you, and as you explore working with victims, do that with us, because we work with a lot of victims. But I understand your comments. And remember, RJI takes a position of supporting a victim's right to restorative justice, which is key. Okay, let's move on and let's bring in Professor Barbara. Are you ready to speak?
Of course, always ready.
And
hello, everyone.
Yourself.
Hello. I've already started the discussion on the chat because we are many to speak. So I try to networking among us as I'm new to this distinguished gathering. So first of all, let me thank you for accepting me as a member of this distinguished group because I started to be part this year, 2023, and work more globally on restorative justice. I'm a professor of criminal procedure at Adam Mickiewicz University. And also I'm a chief of legal clinics at Adam Mickiewicz University. So I do both as a scholar, as a practitioner. I'm trying to work on restorative justice every day. And today I would like to speak particularly about the 4 projects three of them has been concluded this year. One, it was a big project funded by the University of Bologna and also Adam Mickiewicz University by national funds. And it was a big project, Effective Justice. And part of it was obviously devoted to restorative justice. And we are now at the point to publish two books by Peter Lang, publisher. And we also had the great pleasure to host Lisa Ria this year at the project Effective Justice. Lisa shared with us her experiences, was accepted by all members of this research group very enthusiastically, I must say. So we have been thinking to organize something together, and I started discussion also based on the on our chat, that in this project, Effective Justice, we are planning a big conference. It's already settled for the 8th and 9th May. So I will send you invitations. Of course, some panels are already closed by the participants of the project, but we have been...
Yeah, we're still having some trouble with your internet feed, Barbara. Maybe what we'll do is we'll move on. Barbara, we're going to move on and then bring you back. Hopefully your internet picks up again. Okay, so just hold your thought. Okay, let's move on. We'll go to Marie. Marie, great to have you. I know you've been experiencing your own health challenges this year, so it's good to see you. Glad you're with us.
Yeah, thanks very much, Lisa. No, I'm fine. I had a really peculiar virus during the year, spent 10 days in hospital and 9 weeks out of work. I'm fine again, thank you. And thanks, Lisa, for the support. And also, it truly is an honour to be part of this group. It truly is. And I think with your leadership, Lisa, it's incredible the work you do, and everybody does. So thank you very much for that. A couple of things that I've been doing, and then a couple of things that are happening in Ireland to add to what Austin already said. So my big focus at the moment is on restorative or transforming justice approaches, or transforming justice in relation to non-recent institutional abuse. And so included in that, we have, children in residential facilities, mother and baby homes, Magdalene laundries. We have included the Defence Forces because we have a big problem with the Defence Forces in Ireland, and children in day schools. So the whole trust of that, we're funded by what's called the Shared Island Fund. So it's North and South project, set within an international context. We've been looking at truth commissions and all sorts, but really the focus is on transforming justice and how can we include very strongly a restorative justice focus in ways of responding to these matters. There's an OUP book which has to be submitted in April, but we're at a very advanced stage with the research and the analysis and whatever. We have a project website. Actually, I'll put it in the chat after this. And we've produced a policy document and a podcast. And we're actually doing another policy document. That one was on inquiries and commissions of investigation. And the next one is on restorative justice. So I'll put the link to the project website. So that's what's been happening in that sphere in non-recent institutional abuse, in research. In practice and research, I started to flag at our last year's meeting, but two issues are really strongly back on the agenda in Ireland. One is abuse of children in day schools, non-recent. So children who are now like adult men, in their 50s and 60s, disclosing abuse in day schools. Some in elite boys' day schools and some in state schools, boys and girls. So that's back on the agenda. And so in a practice capacity, I've been supporting a group of men who didn't want to go to courts, either for civil for monetary compensation, if that's the term, or for criminal proceedings. They wanted something different. And so I've been supporting them through an entirely restorative process, including restorative truth-telling, restorative redress, restorative conferences, and victim offender dialogue. So I've been supporting them, but I haven't had capacity to do the actual work. So we've kind of gotten anyone who's really got some skill in Ireland around restorative justice, which is a team of them, helping do that process. And it's quite big. That's with one religious order and group. And what's interesting is that the religious order have now also been asking for help for them to do restorative thinking and so on. And again, we have a capacity issue here, right? So I'll come back to that towards the end. So that's very much on the agenda. Another school has done similarly and again have had multiple restorative processes. So at a state level, myself and two others were invited in by our Minister for Education to know how should we do an inquiry and what was the role for restorative and whatever. So there's a scoping inquiry going on at the moment to know how to do an inquiry. So the scoping group came to a project, a small conference that I ran with others in Belfast. So at church and state level, with regard to non-recent institutional abuse, the time has come, there is no doubt about it, for restorative approaches, victim-initiated, victim-focused, all that. But we have a capacity problem. And so I'm going to have to turn attention now to how we're going to get more people trained and properly trained for this work. I've been talking to a couple of others, how we can actually set up more training in Ireland, but it is an issue. Capacity is an issue. Because church and state are now interested and survivors want it, victim survivors. They don't want all the rest, a lot of them. In the practice sphere, I've also been facilitating, again, limited in number, but those that I committed to. So sibling sexual abuse, I facilitated a case yesterday. Siblings, like, as we all know, the power, blow your mind. These two, a 28-year-old and 30-year-old, have a chance of a life now. Yeah, all that guilt and stuff people talked about. It's all been addressed. I was involved with one in the prisons recently, a father who sexually abused his daughter. He's serving 18 years and she needed to meet him. So it was involved in that. So of a small amount of practice, my own issue is capacity, my own capacity. But certainly we've more issues about capacity, which is a good thing, maybe. But it's imminent. We have to increase capacity, practice capacity. So that's that. Back to the Catholic Church. Again, there is a growing momentum, apart from the boys' schools and the day schools and the children's schools. There is now, partly, I think, through the research, we've gotten enormous buy-in to the research from senior political figures, North and South, and from religious leaders, North and South, who wouldn't go near other researchers. I mean, we know this because they've told us. And when we've asked them why, they say, trust, we believe something. But anyway, out of that has come invitations, again, to think about, to meet with them individually, nothing to do with the research, more to do with the practice, to know how can we establish more restorative processes, restorative redress processes, restorative all sorts of things. And again, we've a capacity. I mean, I've said, I'll meet you after Christmas and I'll meet this one and that one. But actually, I mean, one religious order at the end of an interview said, if you set up something for restorative justice, and it's a huge religious order with a lot of victims in multiple jurisdictions, they said, we'll fund it. So there is an absolute appetite for something different. And I think across church and state and survivors, and perpetrators willing, if they're alive, we're mainly dealing with institutional actors here. But there is an appetite, but we have a capacity issue. A couple of other quick things that are important, again, through the research, and research can be interesting because of the people you meet, as you know. We've now had a hard-nosed journalist who's been writing about jail them all and all the rest of it, kind of, over years, now saying, why aren't writing in the Irish Times, prominent Irish newspaper, if one religious order can do this restorative thing, why can't we all do it? So there's a kind of a move in the public discourse around these issues that I'm tracking, which is sexual violence, and whatever. And then there's another thing happening, which is to do with homicides. And we've had a couple of women, largely, but some men, do restorative meetings, largely through the probation service, with the person who murdered their child or murdered somebody in their family. And they're starting to speak out about it. So again, I've been asked to kind of join with them to get stuff going, but there's a capacity issue again. So I think from Ireland, I mean, I'm watching what Austin is saying, and I think there are, if that's, that may well be worrying, but it's just interesting in the research. We are finding that party political matters have played out with victim survivors, that of all swathes, not just Sinn Féin, of all parties, we have heard in this research that party political issues play out with survivors who are used and whatever in party political matters sometimes. Anyway, that's what's happening in Ireland from my perspective. Good news, but definitely capacity issues that have to be addressed.
Okay, Marie, thank you so much. And remember that capacity. I think we all have capacity issues. If RJI can assist in some way, remember us, because as I know that this recording is going out to many, we have 7,000 members and affiliates. Now, not all of them are really active, but many want to get more active. And I have something like 200 people trying to get inside RJI at LinkedIn, 200. So there's interest, and there's interest in being trained, and we have to figure out how we can deliver that training. And I say that to Paulo, especially. Okay, so we'll go back to Barbara, and then we'll end with Jack. And I want to make sure that we take a little bit of time to talk about the war in Israel.
And I will be short, Lisa. I'm so sorry one more time, and I really don't know why my connection wasn't good when it was my turn to speak. So I just want to update you about 4 projects. The first one I started to speak, this effective justice, with this special focus on the values in criminal justice. And one of the values, of course, is connected with restoration. Another project I have concluded this year was on the victim offender mediation, those restorative procedure in criminal justice, how to bring justice closer to the victims, and the systems when the prosecutor is ruling in pre-trial, and the place for victim is not that close to be active, really active party in the trial. So, and the result of this project will be published soon. So I shall update you with the book. It will be open access book. And the third project was connected with consensual proposals, agreements during the criminal trial, with this perspective and focus on restorative justice as well. I sent you the link on the chat. It was also the series by Peter Lang, and I've been thinking that our group, in maybe next year, if Lisa will agree, shall work on something together. Maybe we could try to organize a bigger conference. I'm offering myself as someone who shall take care of it, as I'm very experienced in the field of research, organizing project events, and working on books. So I'm offering my help. And I think maybe in the second part of 2025, it will be a proper time to a hybrid conference with contributions of selected participants, or all of you. It depends on your, of course, availability in this period. And especially today, I would like to speak about my recent research, which is connected with the new formula, restorative justice taken broadly, because I'm specialized in juvenile delinquency as well. And this time I'm trying to concentrate on the children, but as a victims of justice systems, especially the situation of children with incarcerated parents. Because in Central Europe, this group must be recognized. There is somehow recognition, especially of small children up to 3 years, or the children up to 15. Somehow there are procedures how they interfere with the parents in prisons. But at the end, this group must be better recognized, researched, and I'm making some experimental research in this field, and I'm trying to establish the needs and to work with the European scholars.
Barbara, we're having a little bit trouble again. If you can go to audio only, that might help. So you might try that. I know you were closing. Try to go to audio only and we'll come back. Okay, Jack. Last but not least, Reverend Jack Sullivan, Ohio. Introduce yourself properly. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome, Lisa. Thank you. And hello, everyone. I am sorry I joined you late. I have had a schedule change today in that a magazine photographer is coming to my office to take pictures of me for a story in the magazine, the African American News Journal, based in Central Ohio here. But I'm Jack Sullivan Jr. I'm an ordained Christian minister in the denomination known as the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada. And by vocation, I am the executive director of the Ohio Council of Churches, a statewide organization here in Ohio, USA, that brings together 18 Protestant Christian denominations, each one different and unique, but each one comes together through the council, and together we call ourselves a Jesus Christ movement for unity, justice, and peace. And I'm so glad that we're together today. The council intersects with restorative justice in as much as we are working to abolish the death penalty in Ohio. We are collaborating with other organizations here in Ohio to end Ohio's death penalty and therefore reduce the number of states that currently have executions as part of the law to 26. And there are two fronts that we work on with respect to abolition. One is a theological front that you would expect from a Christian organization, but we don't believe that any human being is disposable and that nobody is beyond the reach of God for transformation and redemption, not even people who have hurt us and angered us the most. We're not anti-accountability for those who are rightfully convicted, but we're just anti-lethal means of dealing with our anger and our hurt. And so we don't think people should be forever labeled by the worst thing that they've ever done. And so we're committed to seeing executions come to an end in Ohio. We're working with people from both of the major political parties, Republican and Democrats, who believe strongly that executions have no place in our way of living in the whole country, and particularly in Ohio. And the second front is that from the victims' families portal. I myself had a loved one who was murdered 26 years ago, my younger sister, in Cleveland, Ohio, my hometown, and her hometown as well. Her murderer has still not been found. And just May of this year, a 21-year-old cousin of mine, whom I never had the pleasure of meeting, was shot to death in his hometown of Lexington, Kentucky. And so that makes me, both murders make me, sad to say, a co-victim. And I work with co-victims from across the country who, with tears in our eyes and sometimes with shaky knees, speak truth to power and say to our government officials, do not kill in our names. We do not support executions. Executions do not help any of us. They do not help us to reach closure. There is no closure for us. They don't bring about healing, and they don't bring about restoration. They just continue the vicious cycle of death, human-caused intentional death that claimed our loved ones. We'd much rather see the state invest money in the rehabilitation of those who have been rightfully convicted for murder, and also the restoration of victim families who have forever lost their loved ones to the actions of others. And so the Ohio Council of Churches injects both of these ideas into the public debate here in Ohio. And we believe that we're going to win this debate, and even more than debate, we believe we're going to overturn executions in Ohio because of our strong bipartisan support. We have groups that call themselves progressives and groups that call themselves conservatives working together to abolish the death penalty here in Ohio. So before I close, I'll mention a new front for the council, relatively new, is gun violence prevention. And under that umbrella, I work with more survivors and co-victims of gun violence, people who are rising up, telling their stories and saying, we have got to get guns off of the street. We've got to keep people who should not have guns from obtaining guns, people who have a history of hate, of domestic or any kind of violence, people struggling with mental illnesses. We are working to tighten the avenues through which people can legally buy guns. And we believe that will help our society to move past this very dark cloud of gun violence that is engulfing so many communities around the entire nation. We're calling for the cessation of sales of assault rifles, and we're calling for any loophole that exists through which people can buy guns illegally to be stopped, to be blocked. So I can stop there. We're vividly involved. We're a small staff team of 3 people. I'm the only full-time member of the staff. We hope to expand our work and our staff team next year. But it's a privilege to join you all and to hear your stories and learn of your work priorities. And I look forward to continue listening and even collaboration in the days to come.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Sullivan. And I don't think you were on the call at the start, but I did mention that we did a podcast that you were a part of this year on the death penalty and restorative justice. And also, I think last year on gun violence with other victims and restorative justice. So thank you so much. And it doesn't look like we have Barbara at this point, so she'll probably conclude with what she already said. Okay, so I just briefly want to mention and get a few thoughts, even though we're kind of running out of time. We've got about 15 minutes. Just the fact that this year we did put out a statement on the war in the Israel-Hamas war. It was a simple statement. It was similar to the statement we put out last year on the Ukraine, but it did support one UN statement that they put out right after October 7th, asking for a ceasefire. But also we added our language talking about the need for dialogue and restorative justice. And so let me just add this, and then we'll get some comments here. I know it's a huge subject to talk about, but it's on all of our minds, I know, this war. We did have 2 remarkable conversations. And like I said, one was due to Joe Barry. One was with Israeli mother, Robbie Demelin, and her son was killed by a Palestinian sniper, actually quite a number of years ago. She is very active with a group called Parents Family Forum, and they're victims on both sides They are Palestinians and Israelis who support dialogue and seeking peace and understanding. And yesterday I did a podcast that was unexpected with a Palestinian whose young daughter was killed by an Israeli. His name is Bassam Araman, and you'll be seeing that podcast. It was remarkable. It lasted about an hour. But let's talk about this. Joe, do you have some comments?
Well, Bassam is one of my dearest friends. He embodies to me empathy and compassion. And so I really look forward to hearing that, because I know that you'll have completely brought out the best of him. And I recently did a talk with Bassam and his counterpart, Israeli Rami, who lost his daughter. And these two men they're best friends, they're brothers. And they have so much humor, so much love, so much compassion. And what they said in this talk, and I'm sure you heard it yesterday as well from Bassam, is you don't help us by taking sides. You know, it's so powerful. You know, we have to hear the pain of each other. So thank you so much, Lisa, for, I think this time we need those voices, because there's so many voices that are divisive, that are saying this side's more important than that side. And actually, as we know, all pain is pain and all voices need to be heard. So thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Other comments on this? It's a big issue, but like I said, the voices of victims and survivors, I mean, that's really what the work of RJI is about, and seeking dialogue, opening doors for dialogue, even during periods of war. So other comments? Jane, you have a comment?
I guess I'm just hoping that we can have courage, and because of what I'm seeing, certainly here, you know, a long, long way from the conflict in New Zealand and Australia, is just that people are colleagues, friends, and, you know, on both sides are not talking, and then we're not talking because of the fear of what could happen, and people feeling silenced and removing themselves from all sorts of spaces where we connect, usually because of being unable to talk about it safely. So I guess when we think about restorative, what tools do we have as peacemakers, as conflict resolvers, as people willing to be courageous? What tools can we bring to this to help in whatever way possible? That's what I'm thinking about at the moment.
Very good. Jonathan?
Lisa, I just want to say that we as RJI, if we can just confirm that our stance on this whole Palestinian-Israel issue is what Joe also said, is that we focus on the victims on both sides. The moment you go into the historical challenges, and then that's where the conflict lies. And I can understand also what Jane is saying, people in Australia and New Zealand, and I find it here in South Africa as well. The moment you go into the historical parts of things and who's right and who's wrong, then you get people frustrated about what your statement is. But if we as RJI can just stand for what we believe, that we focus on the victims on both sides and see how we can empower and support them, then that is actually what we are definitely standing for healing and justice and reconciliation, and not looking at who's right and who's wrong.
Right, very good. Austin, looks like you had a comment.
Yeah, Lisa, I completely agree with what Jonathan has said there. Completely agree with that. That we have to, you know, the whole history of that conflict is so complex. We need to just concentrate on the victims here on either side and leave that aside. You know, it was very interesting. Our Deputy Prime Minister went to Israel and into Gaza recently to try and negotiate for some releases of some of the hostages that were Irish. And, you know, there was a very interesting clip when he went to meet the Israeli side, and he was meeting with their foreign minister and a delegation. And the first thing that was kind of thrown at him was, you know, he was there for the victims and to try and get hostages released. And the first thing in the clip that was thrown at him was somebody shouted at him, you know, "Are you here to support us?" You know, and I mean, so from that perspective, we need to just leave all that aside, as Jonathan said, and concentrate on the victims, because there's a huge amount of trauma on both sides now, a huge amount of trauma. And I think there is definitely scope for RJI to get involved here, to reach out to people on both sides that have been affected by this and try and do some work with them. And I really hope that we can do that. I'm certainly up to help in any way that I can in doing that. And I really hope that we can try and find a way to help concentrating on victims.
Absolutely. And I've been so impressed by the organization Parents Families Forum, which both these victim survivors that we mentioned are a part of. So there are actually 700 victims, survivors that are part of that group. And I can't imagine how much it's grown since October 7th. But like Joe said, the conversation I had yesterday was very surprising. It was 11 o'clock at night for Bassam. It lasted an hour. And I, he just wanted to keep talking, but he came from a point of hate, that he hated the person who killed his 10-year-old daughter as she left school. But he changed his mind after being in prison for 7 years. And now he believes in peacemaking, and he believes in reconciliation. He believes in forgiveness. He said everything but restorative justice, but it's all the same, right? Mm-hmm. So we will continue to do work on this front. It is a difficult work, so I will ask for your support. We'll see in the days ahead if we can have some kind of additional meeting where we bring these people in with some of you who want to be there. So other comments about this?
I would mention that I've been to Israel, Palestine twice, although my last visit was circa 2004. My organization, the Ohio Council of Churches, issued a pastoral letter just days after the Hamas attack, calling for the release of hostages and the cessation of violence. We were calling, and we still do call, for a just peace between Israelis and Palestinians, believing that God certainly loves both groups and that God's vision is for justice and peace to flourish between them. And so those words were listed in our pastoral letter. I was part of a retreat of a group called Red Letter Christians back in October of this year. And a small segment of that group and I worked together to write a song called Ceasefire that has been recorded by a singing group called Common Hymnal. But the song does say ceasefire is the goal, and it's an ambitious, creative effort that we hope people will pay attention to. But finally, I do think that we have to support the victims now, but ultimately we're going to have to pay attention to history and figure out some way to work out a just peace between both groups.
Right.
And not us, but them, obviously.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Other comments, and then we'll close. No, it sounds like not. But this takes us to the conclusion. It's been a difficult year for many of us. I think it's just a difficult time in history. So we'll continue to do the work that we do and bring more people into this group. And thank you so much for everything that you do in supporting RJI and representing this group. So thank you, and Merry Christmas to you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bless you all.
Bless you all.
Thanks
Happy
so
New Year
much.
as well.
God bless. Good health.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Good morning.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the RJI podcast series with Lisa Ray. Stay in touch and support our work at restorativejusticeinternational.com.